Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and I had planned to get on here at the end of the season and kind of do an update, just for fun, look at some stats and see how far we've come in the last year, as well as look ahead to what's coming next year. But I wrote this to record at the end of December, and I was planning on releasing it like January 1st, but I didn't get to it until now. But I'm not going to rewrite it, just know that when I say things like last month, I actually mean November. I've just been so busy with work that I haven't had much time to do with anything with the podcast. Plus, I needed a break after December. So I'm combining what was going to be the end of the year update with what would have been a beginning of the year update. So last month, November, I decided I wanted to know how many episodes of my podcast I'd done. I had started tracking the numbers within the titles of the episodes when I first started I Heart Movies, but with the character limits for titles on YouTube, I had decided to drop that. Anchor does have a place to enter what number the episode is, but that goes by season, and as far as I know, only a few podcast platforms even display that information. So as far as I know, it's basically irrelevant and maybe even invisible to the average listener. I don't know, I just hadn't been tracking it. So in order to figure out how many episodes total I'd done, I went back and I counted from the beginning. There were a few that I had put up as bonus episodes, such as when I interviewed some people for the Rosescopers, but then used the recorded audio, with permission from my editor, of course, as podcasts, and I put those as bonus episodes. But these days, I count interviews, even if they're just with my friends and fellow creators, as episodes of the podcast, so even though those episodes wouldn't have been in my original count, they totally are now. I Heart Movies has evolved a bit beyond episodes that each focus specifically on a discussion about one movie, so I'm basically counting anything over 15 to 20 minutes as an official episode. One of the most exciting things I discovered while going back through the episodes was that this year I actually passed 100 episodes of I Heart Movies. They say a quarter of all podcasts never make it past the first episode, and over half of all podcasts never make it past 10 episodes. So I feel like the fact that I'm 3 seasons in, and I've got over 100 episodes now, is kind of a big deal. And that's not even counting Every Version Ever, where I'm now 2 seasons in and have over 60 episodes. Now, some of those episodes are repeats between the shows, so I don't have over 170 episodes, but it's still a big accomplishment. Now, for anyone wondering, if I counted correctly, episode 100, as well as 101, since it was a two-parter, was my discussion with Nikki from Trivial Theater all about Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny. I feel like that's a pretty fitting episode to have as such a milestone episode for the podcast, because it really shows what the show has become. And it was one of those things that we talked about for a long time before actually doing it. And that was I Heart Movies. On Every Version Ever, the milestone episode this year was 50, and that was another one with Nikki. We did a miniseries looking at some of the worst adaptations of Alice in Wonderland, and episode 1 of that miniseries was also episode 50 of the podcast as a whole. Also, just for fun, I decided to go back and count how many episodes of my original YouTube series, Wonderland Wednesday, I was up to, and if I counted correctly there, I hit number 78 this year. I had taken a bunch of time off from that series after starting I Heart Movies, but I brought it back for the summer, and I made a whole bunch of new content. And I really like doing that series, so hopefully I'll have time to bring it back at some point this year too. Even if it's just once in a while, that's the show that basically gave me the template for what my content has become, so I feel like it's important to keep up with, especially since it's also simultaneous content for Every Version Ever. Then I've got some stats from social media. On Twitter, ever since year 1 of my YouTube channel, I've been tracking my growth at the end of the year. I first saw a big animation YouTuber doing this on her socials, Jaden Animations, and I thought it was a great idea, so I started it right away after the first year of my YouTube channel, and I'm not sure if she still does it, but I do. Before we get to where I am now, let's go back to the beginning with the very first tweet of that series. On January 1st, 2018, I was at 33 subscribers, 4,422 channel views, and 71 Twitter followers. I did the same thing next year, but added a video upload count, so I'm not sure how many videos I uploaded in the first year, and I'm not going to go back and count. So on January 1st, 2019, I was at 81 subscribers, 126 videos uploaded, 20,931 channel views, and 97 Twitter followers. So in the first full year of my channel, I grew by almost 50 subscribers, and I got 26 new Twitter followers. Now, technically, I don't really care about Twitter followers. I actually have zero idea where I'm at now. I will check when I get to the end of this script thing that I'm writing right now, but I'm not super active on social media, so I don't really care how much traction that gets. Even though a lot of people will tell you it's super important for your brand to maintain an active online presence, which I know is technically true, but I now have a full-time job, so there's only so much extra time I have to care about such things, and really the only social media that I actually enjoy beyond YouTube and podcasts, if you count those as social media, is Instagram, and even there I'm not that active. I did start a new Instagram this year, one specifically for my channel and podcasts, but I don't think I'm planning on tracking that growth. The next year, I think YouTube made it harder to easily find channel views. I think they're still in my analytics somewhere, but also, against all common sense social media wisdom, I don't really know or care much about my analytics, so I don't actually know how to find it at this point, and I haven't cared. So at the beginning of 2020, I replaced channel views with podcast episodes. At the time, it was just iHeartMovies, since I wouldn't start Every Version Ever until halfway through the year. So on January 1st, 2020, I had 131 subscribers, 144 Twitter followers, 185 YouTube videos, and 54 podcast episodes. So in that year, I grew by exactly 50 YouTube subscribers and 47 Twitter followers. The big milestone for 2020 was that my subscriber count on YouTube finally passed my Twitter followers. Getting new viewers has always been more exciting to me, especially since I'm not super active on social media. So it always slightly annoyed me that I had more Twitter followers than I did YouTube subscribers, but not anymore. So on January 1st, 2021, I had 218 subscribers, 174 Twitter followers, 257 YouTube videos, and 120 podcast episodes between two shows. So in that year, I grew by 87 subscribers and exactly 30 Twitter followers, and I made over 100 videos on YouTube. Of course, most of those were podcast episodes, some of which were just beginning to be repeats, as I started repurposing older content as new episodes for my now 2 podcasts, but that's still a pretty big accomplishment. And that brings us to this year. Sometimes I can't believe I'm still going, especially when a lot of times I feel like I'm not growing as fast as I would like, but I am doing this for fun, so even though I would like to grow faster, ultimately that's not why I do this. So even though it's fun to track this progress and fun to grow my audience, ultimately I just like podcasting, and that will always be the reason that I'm doing this. But having said that, I will also say that this year I did have my biggest growth spurt ever. I grew by well over 100 subscribers on my main channel, plus at the beginning of the year I started a new channel specifically devoted to Every Version Ever, and throughout the year I managed to get that channel up past 70 subscribers too. And that's not just subscribers to the main channel going over to the new one. I actually know that it has a different audience than iHeartMovies, and there are a lot of people subscribed there that are not subscribed to the main channel. So the fact that I got 70 subscribers on there, in addition to over 100 on my main channel, is a pretty big accomplishment in and of itself. But now here's where things get a bit more tricky. Sorting out exactly how much new content I have made. This year I started doing things a bit differently at times, especially when it comes to new guests. I've usually tried to do a Q&A with new guests to the podcast, but up until now those just ended up being part of the main episode we're recording. But this year I decided to give them their own mini episodes to supplement the main episode. That served 2 purposes. It gave me more new content to release at a time when my life started to get busier, and it allowed me to keep the main episode focused on just the thing it was supposed to be about. Which brings me to the other new thing I started doing, tangent episodes. These would happen when my guests and I would go down a rabbit hole of discussion, trailing way off base from the main topic. Sometimes the tangent would be very relevant to the main episode, like Sarah and I tangenting off to talk about the real-life feud that inspired the cartoon feud in Disney's Make Mine Music, and other times they were completely irrelevant and had no place in the main discussion. These are discussions that have been so long to the point that I felt like I needed to cut them completely in order for the episode to stay on topic, but they were so much fun I didn't want to lose them. So instead they just became extra episodes. And I called them bonuses at first, but I think I decided to include them in the main episode count because in some cases they could be longer than some of the other shorter episodes that I actually had made to be main episodes. These tangent episodes live exclusively on iHeartMovies. Even if the episodes they originated in came from Every Version Ever, I really want Every Version Ever to stay true to its focus, and even though it started with episodes dedicated each specifically to a different title each week, I feel like now, 3 years into the show, iHeartMovies can literally be about anything as long as it pertains to film or television. And I feel like if a tangent went on for over 10 minutes, it could be its own episode. That way it keeps the main episodes on track and gives listeners a little something extra to listen to if they want it. Plus, that also gives me the freedom to experiment more with the format. I did experiment a bit last year with my quarantine reviews episodes, but this year I did an episode that was just about Star Wars, like in general, talking about favorite memories and some new Disney Plus specials. Even a year ago, I would have felt like that kind of an episode wasn't what my podcast would be about, but this year I'm just kind of loosening up a bit on things like that. I have more ideas for the next year too. We'll see what I have time to experiment with. So that all brings me back to the main thing I was going to say. The last points on my Twitter threads are getting a bit tricky to define. If I go purely by the numbers, this year across both YouTube channels and podcasts, I have made 392 videos and 182 podcasts. However, that's not the whole story there. This year I had a lot of crossover between the shows, especially after I finally got my full-time job after years of applying for things. As much as I love my job, it really cut down on the amount of time I was able to spend working on the podcast. Like a lot, so I started sharing more episodes between the shows than I otherwise would have. At one point, I even used an episode of Every Version Ever from April as an episode of iHeartMovies in September, and I've never done anything like that before. If I reuse anything, it's usually in the opposite direction, like an old Alice in Wonderland review that gets repurposed as an episode of Every Version Ever. But with limited time to edit or record, I started having to take breaks and ended up having gaps in my release schedule. Especially when at one point I was out of commission for a month after getting so sick I spent a week in the hospital. I hate making my listeners wait too long for new episodes, so I started sharing more content between the podcasts, and that's going to have to keep happening, especially in the next year as my job gets busier and busier. But anyway, all that to say, that makes things rather complicated in figuring out exactly how many episodes I actually produced this year, which is why I was thinking it would be nice to have a spreadsheet so I can track this kind of thing. So that's what I did. It took me almost 5 hours in one sitting at the end of November, plus I've gone back and tweaked things over the last month, and now I have a working spreadsheet to keep track of these things. I actually made several spreadsheets after that initial one, but I'll keep my focus to the main one right now. So, this past year, over both podcasts, I made 51 new podcast episodes. In total, if you're counting this episode, I did 33 new episodes for each podcast, which is purely coincidental that I ended up with the same amount. And yes, doubling that does not equal 51, but some of those episodes were either shared between the podcasts or were reused episodes from previous years. The number 51 is how many entirely brand new episodes between both podcasts that I made in 2021. So, to go back to the tweet format that I've been using for the past 5 years, as of January 1st, 2022, I'm at 351 subscribers, 194 Twitter followers, 310 YouTube videos, and 152 podcast episodes between both of my shows. And to clarify, as I now have 2 channels and 2 podcasts, the YouTube video count is still just iHeartMovies, and the podcast episodes is now specifically referring to unique episodes, and any repeats across both podcasts are not counted as 2 episodes. And I figured this out via my spreadsheet, but had I done the math last year, it should have read 101 podcast episodes total, not 120. Next year, I'm considering splitting this tweet into 2, one for each channel, or maybe just retiring the format. Maybe I'll just keep making this kind of episode to close out the year. I haven't decided yet. I suppose I could do the algorithmically responsible thing and do both. We'll see. I don't always have time to be algorithmically responsible. For anyone curious though, since I did start the new channel for Every Version Ever, here are the stats on that. In the first year of the channel, between fully uploading Season 1 from 2020 and Season 2 from 2021, I made it to 73 subscribers, 81 YouTube videos, and 56 podcast episodes. This past year, I gained 133 subscribers on my main channel and 73 on Every Version Ever. I gained exactly 20 followers on Twitter, which again, I don't really care about, so I don't know why I didn't focus on Instagram instead. I suppose I could add Instagram as a bonus stat for this podcast, since I did start that new account this year, specifically for the podcast and YouTube stuff. Over there I currently have 60 followers. For YouTube videos, like I said, I uploaded 2 seasons worth to the new channel, so that was 81 videos, and then on the main channel I added 53 videos, and those are not all podcast episodes. I do periodic updates as well as the very occasional YouTube exclusive video too. Those are pretty rare these days, as I much prefer podcasting. But anyway, that's where the discrepancy between videos uploaded and podcast episodes come from. I do not count any update that lasts under 5 to 10 minutes to be an actual podcast episode. especially if it's just me in it. Last year I tried to have a strict release schedule, which did not always work out. So this year I think I'm going to try to do a more general release schedule, especially after December. I kind of got burned out with everything I was trying to do between my extremely busy work schedule, where I was pretty much getting overtime every week, and then still trying to do 2 episodes a week between both podcasts. I think that's also part of the reason it took so long to get to this update episode. I was just fully burnt out and needed a break. So going forward, this is what I'm thinking. I'm probably going to be aiming for the weekend on Every Version Ever. I got used to releasing on Fridays, so I am going to aim for that, but I'm not going to be incredibly strict about it. And I will not be forcing myself to be releasing something new every single week, or even every other week. And since Every Version Ever actually is based around miniseries dedicated to a single book or story, I think I'm probably only going to plan to do new episodes weekly when I have a full miniseries either finished and ready to go, or mostly ready to go. And I also won't limit each miniseries to a certain number of episodes like I was thinking about last year. I will just do as many as I feel like doing for whatever story I'm currently working on. It could be 3, it could be 10, we'll just see what happens when I get there. On iHeart Movies, the release schedule I was aiming for in the latter half of 2021 was 2 new episodes a month, with time off happening periodically as needed or demanded by my real-life job schedule. And I think I generally will still aim for that, but I'm not going to hold myself to it, like when I'm in the middle of a mini-series on Every Version Ever. Don't expect too many new episodes of iHeart Movies. That would not be sustainable for me at that point. And I also find myself gravitating towards doing mostly miniseries anyway, even on the main podcast, and especially when it comes to Disney movies. So when I have a miniseries coming up, there may be a time gap with no episodes for a few weeks, and then a month or so with new episodes every week, followed by another drought. So it's not perfect, but I might have to do something like that to keep myself sane, especially during busy periods at my job. In a perfect world, I'd have new episodes of each podcast every week, but I can't do that, and as I found out in December, I can't even lie to myself about that. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, I could get 8 fully produced episodes out in December across both podcasts before Christmas, and just no, I could not, and I don't know how I ever thought I could convince myself that I could. I ended up so behind that it was a wonder that I got out 7 episodes that I did before the end of the year, though I did end up making 3 shorter extra episodes that I had not factored in, so I guess that counts for something too. But yeah, no, this next year I need to set myself some more realistic goals. So while the first few months of 2022 may not have a whole lot of content from me, stay tuned, because if everything goes right, there is a lot more to come this next year. I've got a lot of episodes planned, I've got a whole bunch of fun guests lined up. I just need to learn how to pace myself and balance this as of yet non-paying job with my full-time job that actually pays the bills, but I guess that's just part of life. So I won't give away too many upcoming episodes, especially since I've barely begun recording so far for the year, and things can always change, but some of the episodes that I have planned for later this year include a Cinderella-based miniseries for the Disney Movie Marathon, an iHeart Animation episode looking at the Netflix animated series Centaur World, and of course I'll have to do an episode ranking all the animated films from 2021 as well, like I do every year, but I'm still trying to get caught up on those films, so that'll probably be at least a month away. Of course, there is a lot more than just those to come, but you'll have to wait and see what happens when we get there, and so will I, because I haven't recorded any of them yet. And if you have any requests, feel free to tweet at me or drop me a comment on YouTube. I'm always looking for ideas of things to cover. Even though I have my own list, it's nice to switch things up once in a while. Anyway, thank you all for a great 2021. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I look forward to bringing you so much more in 2022. We'll see you soon.